Applications are submitted through our grants management system. You heard Jody mention web grants. If you don't have a web grants account, you'll need to register for one. Registration can take a day or two to be approved and processed. So just make sure that you register well in advance of the November 1st deadline. Applications should be submitted by a member of the organization authorized to apply for grants. So typically this is kind of a high-level administrator, a director, a supervisor, principal, or business manager, someone in that position. And you can see a complete copy of the application questions in the request for applications on our webpage, and we're currently finalizing a fillable application form that we'll post there as well. We do that because we encourage people to develop their applications outside of web grants and not use web grants as a place to edit, as it can be a little cumbersome and definitely difficult, especially if you're collaborating with others on the application. So best to kind of create a shared doc or use the fillable form and work on that first, finalize the application there, and then just kind of copy and paste it into the web grants application. So applications are currently being accepted now, and the deadline to apply is Monday, November 1st by midnight. The link to apply is also on the program webpage, and we can drop a link to that webpage in the chat as well. So this is just kind of a quick look at the grant timeline. This is a 1.5-year grant. So successful grantees will be awarded and start their grant activities in January of 2022. And then the grant ends in July of 2023. And so you see the pre-award timeline on the left. Like I said, the application opened on October 4th, so it's currently open now. The deadline is midnight, November 1st, and then we'll be making grant announcements in early January, and we always let everybody know. So if you applied, whether you were awarded or not, you get a email from me on the results of your application. On the right is the grantee timeline, so it kind of goes through in a little bit more detail what's happening once you receive the grant. The first thing is that you need to submit certain documents. These are things like certificate of insurance, W-9, things required by the state in order to set up a grant with us, and then signing the grant agreement itself. Once we have those and the grant agreement's been signed, you're eligible to request that first disbursement of funds, which is $5,000 for everyone receiving the standard grant amount of $10,000. In February, there has typically been a Farm to School Awareness Day, which is sort of TBD whether that will happen or not, but we would communicate that. That's just a chance to come to the State House in Montpelier and engage in a full day of activities around celebrating farm to school and farm to early childhood, speaking with legislators and representatives, and sharing stories about the importance of that. So all grantees are invited to that. It's not clear yet if that's going to happen this year or not. It didn't happen last year. February is also when we'd be hosting an onboarding meeting, which kind of depending on the COVID situation, we may do virtually or we've done in person in the past. But the onboarding meeting is a requirement of the grant. It's just an opportunity to get your team together and to go over some of the grant logistics and kind of get you started on the right foot. It's also an opportunity to kind of answer any questions that you or your team may have about how the grant works. Your coach is at that meeting as well, so it's often the first opportunity you have to interact with your grant coach and also meet all the technical service providers. And then from February really through December of 2022, the expectation is that grantees are working with the technical service providers, with their coach, developing their action plan, and just working on those grant activities. The interim report is due at the end of December of 2022. If you feel like you've accomplished a lot of your initial goals, you're certainly able to submit that interim report early. We want to make sure that the interim report captures a substantial amount of the grant activities, so we don't want folks submitting that in February of 2022, but certainly there's some flexibility with that deadline, especially since it is tied to that second disbursement of funds. And then you have from December until July of 2023 when the final report is done. One thing to note here is that the grant has sort of bookends on when it starts and when it ends, but that doesn't mean that your farm to school work needs to conclude at that point, or that anything written in your action plan has to be complete. The grant and all the things that come with it are really meant to help move your goals and your action plan along, and we expect and hope that people continue to work on that outside of the grant. A quick couple things about the grant review process. Up top here, we just have a few bullet points around what a strong application looks like. So one of the things that we like to see, there is a requirement that certain people submit letters of support for your application. There's also room to submit additional letters of support. And one of the things we really like to see is explicitly, people writing those letters, how they plan to engage with the grant activities. Not just that they support the submission of the application, but more details about what they plan to do to support the team and engage in the activities in the grant throughout the grant period. We also really like to see diverse representation on the project team that I talked about. So the more people from across your organization and within your community that can come together to support these activities, the more likely that you're going to succeed in building that really robust and integrated farm to school or farm to early childhood program. So really thinking through, do we have representation from folks that work in our meal program or food service program? Do we have student representation? Do we have parent representation? Do we have teachers? The strongest farm to school teams, farm to early childhood teams, are made up of people from across the organization and the community. We'll be looking at the clarity of your grant plan. So that just means, do you have a real clear vision for what you're hoping to accomplish, both during the grant and afterwards? And is it clear who's going to be responsible for what and how you'll achieve those goals using the grant and the resources provided? And again, it's always nice to see some planning and some commitment around continuing the work beyond the grant period. Each application, our process is that each application submitted gets reviewed independently by 3 different people using the same scoring rubric. And so we take those 3 scores and average them together, and that becomes the basis for the final score in kind of the decision around who is to be awarded. The review committee is made up of stakeholders from across Vermont that are involved in farm to school in different capacities. If you do have an interest in joining that review committee, we'd love to bring in new people. It's a great way to kind of learn about the process, learn about the grant itself. It can be a great way if you're thinking of applying in the future as well. So you can contact us, put in the chat, or reach out to me via phone or email if you have an interest in reviewing grants this year or any future years.